So, hey everyone, nice to meet you today. So, as Yulia mentioned, today we're gonna talk about journey mapping workshops and how to conduct them online. We'll share some tips and ideas to make such workshops practical and valuable for all participants. And before we start, I'd like to thank you for all of your challenges that you shared with us before this event. Unfortunately, we can't cover all of them because it will take several hours. Yeah, but we believe this talk will cover most of these challenges. So let's move on. First of all, let us introduce ourselves. Yeah. My name is Nick, and I'm the head of UXPressia Academy, our online educational platform. And I also wear the head of a consultant here at UXPressia, meaning that I take part in our consulting projects. And being a consultant for more than 7 years at UXPressia and by myself, I organize dozens of corporate trainings and workshops about journey mapping, jobs to be done, empathy mapping, and other aspects of customer experience. So I'll share my own experience today. Yana, can you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Nick. Hey, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Yana Sanko, and I'm head of consultancy at UXPressia. And we conduct and run usually long-term transformational projects that help companies and teams to change the way they think about customers, about people who will be using their products or services. And for sure, workshops are one of the greatest tools to achieve those long-term goals. And personally, for me, facilitating workshops is somewhat a passion. So I think online workshops actually is what made this past year a little bit more bearable for me personally. And so I hope we will share something useful for you as well today. Nick?
Thank you, Yana. So let's start talking about journey mapping workshops. Yeah. So I believe 2 years ago, something like this, before the pandemic time, yeah, the journey mapping workshop expected something like this. Yeah. I mean, when all participants are in one room, yeah, when they are all working on a, let's say, single and live map and so on. And today, the journey mapping workshop is something like this. I mean, when everyone is at home, yeah, sitting in a comfortable chair, and sometimes like this guy with a cat, yeah, dreaming of something outside the workshop. And you have to do your best to make it happen because you can't physically involve them in work. Yeah, you can physically join some specific team, yeah, and ignite their work. So let's discuss what to do in this case, yeah, in today. First of all, you must never forget that journey mapping, I mean, as an activity, or let's say as an initiative, yeah, is a journey. I mean, you will go through some steps to achieve your business goals. Journey mapping is not just about building map, yeah. So we can apply the journey mindset to this process. I mean, building a map is the central part of each initiative, but something happens before mapping and after mapping. In some cases, you must put everyone on the same page before building the final version of the map. Or let's say, gather some information from different stakeholders. And you might need to use the map after it's done to come up with some improvements. Or you can use it to, let's say, spread the knowledge about your customers across your organization and engage employees into optimizing the journey. So here is the process visualization from our journey management framework. Yeah, it defines several steps that each team goes through while managing a single journey mapping initiative. And each step actually can take hours or even weeks, yeah, depending on your context and goals of your journey mapping initiative. So depending on your initiative goals, you can have a, let's say, specific workshop at a particular step, or you can conduct a single workshop or a set of workshops to cover several of these steps. Yeah, I'll show you some examples in a moment. And you can have different formats of the workshop based on your goals. I mean, in some cases, you'll be working with a ready-made map, yeah, brainstorming ideas of improvements based on this map. In some cases, you'll be building a map together with your team, and so on. So let me show you some possible examples. Imagine that you want to launch a new product or service. In this case, you can organize a 2-day workshop to go through all of these steps. I mean, from agreeing on initiative goals and setting the scene to brainstorming ideas about this new product, yeah, based on the map. And this will be some kind of all-in-one workshop. Or imagine a situation when you were asked to analyze some existing service and improve it. And keeping in mind that you've already defined your objectives and formed the team, yeah, you will probably organize a workshop with client-facing employees to gather some insights and details about your customers. And you can also organize a separate workshop to ideate based on the map, because I believe you want to improve something, yeah, and engage these employees into optimizing the journey. Or imagine a situation when you've already built a map, yeah, and you want to engage your stakeholders into, let's say, creating a strategy together. In this case, you might want your journey mapping workshop to help you align all stakeholders around map, yeah, and clarify all information about customers and actually agree on an action plan, yeah. As you can see, it all depends on your goals. There is no silver bullet here in terms of the best format of your workshop, yeah. So please answer these questions first, yeah, before designing your next journey mapping workshop, because actually goals define your workshop's design and design process. And summing it up, here's an excellent quote from one of our clients. Yeah. It's really hard to achieve quick results in terms of building a map, I mean, and teach your team and stakeholders simultaneously. Yeah, it would be best if you always try to find a balance between what you do together with your team and yourself. I mean, in some cases, you will need to prepare a backbone, or let's say a template of a map in advance, yeah, without spending time teaching your team about the essence. In some cases, it's crucial to involve your team at the very beginning of the mapping process and to organize a workshop to build this backbone together with your team. So please always consider your context and your goals. And please don't try to design the one-size-fits-all workshop. Okay, so let's move on towards the workshop design. And let's point out key issues that can arise during the online workshop. First of all, remember about the access to different tools and artifacts that you will share with participants. Probably you faced a situation when someone can't open some link because they don't have access, and it all takes time to solve this issue. Yeah, so slowing down the workshop pace. So please check all access rights before the workshop. Next, always remember that online conversations take more time. People need to unmute themselves, yeah, or you can easily miss some signals like raised hand, yeah, thinking that there are no questions and continuing your workshop. Or there can be some network issues that break or interrupt the online discussion. And of course, people can have really awful mics. I mean, a participant starts asking a question, but no one hears them, yeah, and you start telling we don't hear you, check your mic, yeah, and so on and so forth. So ask your participants to check their mics beforehand. And be sure that your task descriptions and let's say framing questions are clear and eliminate ambiguity. Yeah, imagine that you are dealing with small teams, yeah, during the workshop, and you gave them a task and created separate rooms for these teams. Yeah, if the practice started, it would be super hard to clarify something to all teams simultaneously in case of any questions about this task. I mean, you will need to close all rooms, return all participants to the main session, yeah, clarify some information, and open all rooms again. Yeah, in the case of several virtual rooms, yeah, you will understand that a team didn't get the task right only after you visit the room, yeah, and no, you won't understand that before this. So during the offline workshop, it's so easy to just shout aloud, "Hey teams, I need to clarify something," yeah, and you can grab their attention. So now I'll describe some things to consider when preparing for any online workshop. First of all, consider inviting a co-facilitator, because online workshop means that you will deal with many different tools, starting from video conferencing service, ending with a journey mapping software. Yeah. So first of all, the co-facilitator will help you manage all these services. For example, suppose you are using Zoom, yeah, as a video conferencing service. In that case, the co-facilitator will help you manage breakout rooms, share some links with the participants here, and help with latecomers. Secondly, a co-facilitator will help you with teams. I mean, during an online workshop, it's pretty hard to be aware of what's going on in different breakout rooms, yeah, comparing to an offline workshop when you can hear every team. Yeah, and a co-facilitator can track participants' emotions while you are sharing your screen and giving a short talk. Yeah. So what else? Prepare different versions of your timing. We've just discussed possible issues that can happen during the workshop. So break your workshop into several logical parts and think about what you can leave as homework, yeah, after the workshop if you will be out of time. Think about different activities that you will skip, or let's say different versions of the practice, and so on. And with this in mind, you should set all roles and expectations before and after the workshop, or at the beginning of the workshop. Consider you skipped some parts of the workshop and decided to make them a part of homework. Yeah. So it would be best if you clearly defined who will be responsible for completing this part. Yeah. Or consider you came up with a lot of ideas based on the map. So who will be responsible for implementing these ideas or sharing them with other teams, and so on. So keep in mind that you should set all roles and expectations before and after the workshop. And you know, the journey mapping workshop is a journey too. I mean, you can apply the journey mindset here and design not only the workshop itself, yeah, but what goes before and after the workshop. So now I'll pass the mic to Yana. She will give you more specific advices about designing your online workshop. Yana, the mic is yours.
Thank you, Nick. So give me 1 second and I'll share my screen now. Hope you see it by now. Yeah, so some thoughts about how can you approach actually the task of designing your first, maybe even not first journey mapping workshop. So first of all, As Nick already mentioned, timing is ruthless, and in most cases, you will not do the whole journey mapping exercise at once. And it's really sad when you discover that at the end of the workshop. So it's better to decide in advance what kind of could be your homework and what could be done afterwards, and who will do that. And also, you can actually, as a designer, as a workshop designer, you can play with different options of session scope. For example, you have some typical activities as listed here in this example. And in the case when you want to kind of build the map together with the team, but you also want to make sure that you gather as much insights from them as possible. For example, in this story about client-facing employees who can only be with you for one workshop because they have other work to do. In this case, you might want to kind of work with setting objectives and defining personas out of the workshop. And you also would want to create this skeleton or map structure or backbone in advance and present it to the team, map everything together, and then go and decide on action planning afterwards. And that would work. Of course, if you, for example, work with product team and you work together to build some new product, you probably would want to go through all steps together. And in this case, you will structure your workshop differently. So this is a room for improvisation, and you can adjust what you add to the session scope based on your goals and also your restrictions, because probably in most cases you will have some restrictions. And if we talk about preparing map structure or skeleton in advance, here's some examples. So when we talk about skeleton, we mean that there are layers through which we look at journey, and there are stages or steps, or sometimes sometimes we call them touch points, through which your persona goes through. So if you can, it would be great to prepare this in advance and provide your team with the structure. And if you think there might be disagreement, you can either send it in advance and ask if there are any corrections, or you can clarify those things during the workshop itself. So you kind of showing the map, especially if it's an online setting, you're showing the map structure to the team, ask them if everything is correct, and they kind of make adjustments. And in terms of timing, it's much more preferable, because if you ask people to build something from the scratch, it takes a lot of time to remember what are the steps of the process and stuff like that. But if you provide them with some first draft, even if it's not entirely correct, it's much quicker for them to discuss and make adjustments. So this is a good thing to do if you are kind of pressed for time and need to squeeze in other activities into your journey mapping workshop. And then also you can use these research results. Our product team conducted the research of kind of journey mapping layers that people use the most. And if you do not know where to start, you for sure can start with something that many other people use. For example, we can see that user or customer goals are at the top of the rating, and that definitely makes sense. We can see that many people find experience graph useful for their journeys. So you can kind of have it as a cheat sheet to decide which layers to include into your journey. And same goes for stages. We actually have this great journey map stages deck, cards deck. And I believe Yulia is sharing the link to PDF you can download in the chat right now. So basically, again, those are cheat cards for you to use either during the workshop or before the workshop to make sure that you kind of covered all possible stages for your product or service. And also one more thing other teams are using is, if you are not sure that all people during the workshop, kind of all the participants of the workshop are on the same page about the methodology, if you think some of them kind of see or hear about it in the first time, you might want to use UXPressia Academy, for example, or other educational materials or opportunities outside the workshop. So you skip the part where you educate them during the workshop and make sure they kind of come prepared. And we also sometimes use it in our transformational projects with clients, where we first ask people to go through this self-paced educational program, and then and only then we get together to really work during the workshop and build some map. And another thing you can play with is session duration. So, and especially online format gives you a lot of different options here. So here are two examples. In one case, you would go with 4 hours workshop, when 1 or 2 weeks pause, and then again 4 hours workshop. First part would be to present and discuss personas and build maps. And another part is to finalize maps and create ideas and action plans based on that. And this is the approach we find working really well, because this gap in 1 or 2 weeks between 2 workshops, it provides the space and time for people to kind of verify and validate the assumptions they put into the maps, and also to do additional research, and also just to marinate on some stuff and maybe come up with more new insights and ideas. Online, as I mentioned before, provides more opportunities to play with. So instead of going with those 4-hour blocks, you can actually go with smaller time slots dedicated. For example, you can take 2 and 2 hours, 2 days in a row, then a break, and then again, for example, 1.5 hour, 1.5 hour. It all actually depends not only on your goals as a facilitator or consultant and the project context, but also on the organizational habits. So for example, we have one client who really prefers those shorter sessions, because 1.5 hour is like their maximal attention span. So after that, they have a lot of stuff going on outside the workshop, of course, as everyone else. And after just working for 1 hour or hour and a half, they just they're out of it. They cannot proceed, they are not fully into the workshop activities. And in other case, with other client, we book 4 hours workshops, and it works perfectly, because they kind of have the possibility to go into this either virtual or real room together, and actually kind of disconnect from everything else what happens, and really dive into this mapping activity, and it works for them. So one of the tips here, I guess, in addition to considering what works for you as a facilitator, is also to check what works for the team you're working with, and what are their habits, and how it does work for them. And another thing is, I see that sometimes it's forgotten, but it's really important, I believe, is that online workshops are much more like interaction design in general. So you have real kind of possibility to apply the same workshop we want to apply using journey map in general to what you do and what experience you create to workshop attendant. And in practice, that means, for example, that it's better to go with one step at a time, so people wouldn't be overwhelmed with instructions to go through. And also thinking about minimizing switching between screens. So if you, for example, use Zoom as a conferencing tool, and also some, I don't know, Google Drive, for example, for some documents to read, and then some slides, and then some maybe mapping platform, I would advise you to consider how you can at least minimize the number of the screens, because each switch means that person can let's be honest, that person can see notification on Facebook or LinkedIn or some messengers, and you're just losing them, right? So it's like critical to create this flow for people to kind of to be with you during the workshop. And also, one more thing, Nick already mentioned that, but framing questions, tasks, and examples, they do really matter. And it means that if you change even one small word in your framing question that you provide your participants with, you might actually get different results. For example, if you need to describe, let's say, process in your map, and you ask people, in one case, you would ask people what kind of process persona goes through. And maybe another question would be what process steps persona goes through. And you kind of, it's kind of intuitive that people would give you very different results. So if you want them to kind of describe process as a steps, you might want to give them a hint. And also on this screenshot, I've tried to find an example from another workshop. For example, here it's a journey about, I believe, some conference attending or something like that. And we've noticed that the team struggles with kind of defining goals, like articulate, strong, and kind of assertive goals. And they're trying to kind of go with very uncertain wording for the user goals they're trying to define. So we provided them with examples. So we asked them to make sure that goals they kind of formulate start with to find, to understand, to get, to receive something, etc., etc. And it helped them to keep this example before, like in front of them, and follow it. And another great concept that really helped me a lot, and maybe will help you, it's a great book, actually. I really recommend it for anyone who needs to facilitate workshops or meetings. It's very kind of practical and full of advice. And there is a concept of points of agreement introduced in this book. And basically the idea is very simple, that the more people you have in the room, the more time you need to agree on anything, because there are more those points of agreements. And that means that actually kind of size of the group you work with, it matters a lot in terms of timing you set for your workshop. And it also provides you with the room for kind of creativity and flexibility in terms of facilitation. So one of the tips from us, what really works in journey mapping workshops, I believe, is that you can leverage different group size for different kinds of activities. For example, if you need to kind of generate more ideas as much as possible, in fact, you would go in pairs. You could go in pairs. And I remember someone asked about how do you make sure that all people participate during the workshop and no one actually keeps kind of distance or silent. This is a great move. For one of the kind of steps or activities, you group people into pairs, and this way it's really hard to keep silence and not contribute, because it becomes really, really visible, and it's like it's socially hard. So if you need to kind of come up with ideas, you can try this, and in this case you will kind of have bigger volume of ideas. If you need to discuss or develop something, you might want to go with bigger groups, like, for example, teams of 3 or 4 people, because that provides a room for discussion, and kind of you will make sure that there are if there are different opinions on something, they probably will be raised, hopefully. And also, those groups are not too big to discuss something, and so it will not take forever for everyone to share their opinion. And finally, if you have something mapped out already, but it's really important for everyone to agree on that. You might use like even bigger groups, up to 8 people, for example, to look at something and share something and finalize it. And another benefit of this approach is that it breaks the monotony of the same practice over and over again. So in this case, it's more interesting for people as well and more engaging. So like each time you go to the next step, the group is somewhat different, and it also like makes it more engaging. And to provide you with an example from the journey mapping workshop we've done last year. So here, I hope it's like you can see the at least the concept. So there are 2 halves of the map, and they are color coded. So at some point we splitted people in 2 groups and ask them to work on those halves of the map. So you work with yellow part and you work with the blue part. And then for some other important step, in this case, it was about business goals. It was important to discuss business goals together because it's not like the matter of opinion. It's not something you want to kind of brainstorm and go with that, right? So we had some brainstorming, and then we put people together and ask them to discuss it all together and make sure that there is no confusion about what our business goals for each step are. So each time we use it, I find it really useful, and maybe you will too. And then last but not least, we talked about facilitating mapping for some time now, and but any mapping actually is should at least lead to actions, right? And that means that you need to make sure that your mapping exercise actually ends up leading you to good ideas, and that could be tricky sometimes. So right now I want to give you a glimpse of what we share in full in our 4 hours workshop, Journey Ideation Strategies, which will happen on March 30. So basically, what we were trying to solve is that in many cases, there is very straightforward approach. So there is a problem and you find a solution for this problem. Rinse, repeat, right? And there is nothing wrong with that approach, like that we should do. But also, in our experience, it oftentimes creates this myopic vision of the map, and the team spend a lot of time building a map and then focuses solely on this layer of problems and doesn't see at all the rest of the map. And we were thinking how to approach that and how to help kind of teams to generate more different ideas, not only solving problems, but also maybe seeing opportunities based on that map, and how to facilitate that process. And that's how we came up with those strategies. And actually, each strategy is kind of a lens which allows you to see your map differently from different angle. And again, to give you just a glimpse, an example. So one of the strategies is designing an emotional graph. And it's based on the assumption that kind of any experience, any interaction with business or service or product assumes that there is some, let's say, drama behind it, right? So there are some low points and some high points. And that means that we can actually design it as a whole storyline. So I have a question for you. If we talk about designing a workshop, which kind of experience line you think would be preferable? Or which one would you prefer? Just type the number in the chat. Yeah, pick and roll, right, right. I wanted to mention it too. Yeah, thank you very much. I think we have a consensus here. So, well, I definitely can see some examples, and actually I know some examples where 1 or 3 would also make sense. And I definitely can see some organizational drama behind it. But as a facilitator, I for sure would prefer the second option too. And what is important to remember here, what it means actually for me as a facilitator. Uh, this first half of the workshop in this case couldn't go too well. And when we look at the graph in general, we like understand it. It's a common sense to understand that it's better that it ends on a good note. And we remember about peak and rule. But in practice, what I see, especially when people are kind of conducting their first workshop, and maybe if you have no experience with workshop, it might help you, especially when you come to a group of people, especially online, when you cannot actually like read all this non-verbal science, and you need to try and understand what's happening with people right now. And what you see is that people are actually somewhat bored, or maybe not reacting too actively, and they seem to be either hesitant or just kind of a little bit distracted. It's actually very painful for you as a facilitator. It's actually a painful moment to go through, because like you need to just hold on and move on with what you're doing, but also you need to make sure you are not kind of losing touch with the reality, and not losing the moment when you're actually like they are disconnecting. So it's a very complex balance. And what I've seen, let's say, less experienced facilitators do, they try to enrich the first part of the workshop with very either fancy energizers or icebreakers, with some fun activities, with something like to receive immediate, let's say, gratification from the group, right? To kind of to have a good start. And that's fine, but also it sometimes means that people have this spike of energy at the beginning, and they do not kind of survive till the end. So it's actually really preferable to go through these emotional graph than you design in the workshop. But it also means that for the first part of the workshop, you need to kind of to hold tight and be okay with people somewhat kind of getting slow into it, or people somewhat bored. And I think it's challenging, but also it could be really rewarding if you hold this line. So that was just an example of one of the strategies we use to work with journey maps and to kind of to enrich the maps you've built with better ideas. And we have 9 of those strategies actually. And as I mentioned before, we share them during this workshop, which will happen on March 3rd. And if you want to attend the workshop, if we got your attention today for with what we've shared, you can actually use this code to get 20% off the price. And also, if you want to attend with your team, we also have team bundle options, so also could be arranged. And I guess on that note, I think that's it for today in terms of what we wanted to share. And now we will have some time for questions and answers.
Yeah, Yana, Nick, first of all, thank you so much for the talk and sharing the tips and tricks you yourself tried out and sort of mastered. And now let's move on to the Q&A session. I see we have a couple of questions already. And the first one sounds like this. How to convince stakeholders of the value and actually drive change in the organization? Do you have any tips for that?
I would first probably ask what kind of stakeholders, because it really matters. And there are different kinds of strategies that could be employed here. And in many cases, if you're acting inside of the organization and stakeholders, for example, are senior leadership, you can try and find some example. What could you do like independently to show them like a glimpse of value, and convince them with some examples, not just like presenting, here's the tool, I think it would work. But if you work with external clients, I think it would be a whole different story and a different approach. So it really matters. Nick, maybe you want to add something.
Yeah, I totally agree that it all depends on your context here. I mean, in the context of your company or current situation inside the company, I can share some, let's say, possible ways to achieve quick wins here in getting buy-in. Once again, just to make it clear, there are no silver bullets here, yeah. And what I'm going to share is one of the possible way. First of all, journey mapping initiative usually requires time, yeah, to see the impact. So first, you need to conduct some research. You need to build a map and implement some ideas based on this map, yeah, to see the impact, I mean, the impact of improvements. And if you don't have buy-in from your team of stakeholders, yeah, some time long-lasting initiatives can lead to disappointment, yeah, and loss of interest. So one of the possible way to achieve a quick win here is to start with a specific journey, yeah, not a bird's eye view, or let's say global scope journey, because in this case you will spend less resources on research and creation process, and you'll have more chances to find, let's say, cool and interesting ideas based on this map, because such map will contain more details, and you will probably change customer experience faster. So try to focus on a journey where you can quickly implement all new ideas, yeah, and see results, yeah. If you need to prove effectiveness of this tool, of this technique. What else? You can consider running a pilot project. I mean, focus on a journey where the cost of a mistake is rather low. I mean, this will not put an end to all other initiatives, all next initiatives, yeah. So in case of failure, there will be less frustration for the team and stakeholders. And actually, if you need to sell the idea of journey mapping, yeah, to top managers or to different stakeholders or to clients, you can actually, first of all, yeah, you can start with something that you can quickly create. I mean, you can find some ready-made and filled-in templates on the internet, I mean, for your domain area. And actually, UXPressia has tons of different templates for different domain areas. And based on this map, and you can actually build this map based on your hypothesis, yeah, and quick and dirty research. I mean, based on the data that you already have in your hands, yeah. And after that, you can do this by yourself, yeah. I mean, you after that you can come up with some ideas for improvements, and you can use mentioned before idea generation strategies, yeah. And next, you can present these ideas to your stakeholders and tell them that journey mapping technique helped you to find those ideas, yeah. And you can also show them how to track the impact of these ideas. Or for example, you can come up with some ideas, implement them, and show your stakeholders the real value, yeah, that the final impact. So yeah, probably that's one of the possible way to achieve a quick win here in getting buy-in. Of course, there are more, and probably will need one more hour, yeah, to discuss all of them. I hope I answer this question.
Nick, thank you so much. It sound like you can go on and on for an hour, so maybe next time. Thank you. We have another question. Actually, we have a lot of them, so let's just start with the first one from Tim. How do you cycle divergent and convergent thinking throughout the journey stages?
Well, maybe I'll start. In most cases, when we design workshop, we keep in mind this idea of kind of double diamond thinking, and we ask ourselves for each stage or for each layer of the map, which kind of thinking we need here. As I've mentioned before, in some cases, we need to gather as much as possible, either ideas or insights or like some examples or problems for that matter. And in that case, we would go as wide as possible. But also we would need to diverge. For example, with the problems layer, we would not solve all the problems. So after generating as many as possible, we would then apply this divergent thinking and try and kind of prioritize them, for example, decide which one are critical ones. So in some layers, you would use only one type of thinking, but in most, I believe, you would use both. Hope that answers.
Yeah, team, let us know if that answers. Nick, do you have anything to add, or we can move on?
Probably one thing to add, Yana mentioned during this session today that you can leverage the group size, yeah, for discussions. And for example, you can use the divergent part of this double diamond, yeah, to generate a lot of different ideas or to generate possible steps or stages of the map, yeah, in small groups, and then you can converge, yeah, with more with less groups, yeah, and discuss everything. And you can, as Yana mentioned here, bring all of them into to one group, yeah, and finalize all your thoughts and discussions, something like this. So leverage the group size.
Awesome, Nick, thank you so much. We have another question from Ezra here. Sometimes the facilitator needs some time to merge some work done. What is the best time between the sessions? From the facilitator's point of view, probably.
Let me check if I understand the question correctly. You mean like some work on the map?
I assume yes. Ezra, please do elaborate on that. Let's go with this option first, I guess.
Yeah, okay. Again, oh yeah, Ezra says yes. So I've guessed right. So mostly, again, it's a matter of thinking in advance when you're planning the whole initiative, not just the workshop. So if you know that you would need to kind of some time to process what team did during the workshop before go into second session, you can plan a break between those sessions. And for example, in one of the workshops we facilitated last year, we actually made a break in 3 days for people just to be able to kind of to gather additional information, but also for us to figure out how to move them to the next stage and to process what they produced during the first phase. So I prefer, if that's possible at all, to design not just single workshop, but the series of activities, and try, of course, it's a matter of kind of trying to guess what will happen, but at least I like to leave the room for myself, even if it's just a half a day in some cases, to make sure that I have kind of some space to change something if I need to.
Nick, anything to add?
Probably one thing, in many cases, from my own experience, yeah, in many cases, I do as I always do after different customer interview sessions. I mean, I plan some time, yeah, to after the workshop. I mean, the same day or next day, I plan some time to merge, yeah, all information and so on. So you can plan some time right after the workshop. I mean, the same day or next day, when you have, let's say, all when you still have all your information in your head, nothing will take this information out of your head. Yeah. So plan some time right after the workshop to do this. If you're working alone, I mean, if you want to do this part alone.
Great, thank you, Ezra. Hope both Yana and Nick did answer your question. The next one is from Ellen. Ellen asks, what do you think is the best icebreaker for remote workshop?
Nick, do you want to go first?
My first reaction was there is no silver bullet, because I mentioned this several times during this session. Yeah, I don't believe that there is the best icebreaker. It all depends on the team. Yeah, it all depends on the workshop goals. So in some cases, for example, yesterday we had a workshop with some external team, and we knew that some people in this team, they just don't know how to work with some software. So the icebreaker was dedicated to first of all to introduce them some basic features of this software, and just understand their let's say their emotions right now, yeah, their mood and so on. So I would say that it all depends on your workshop, on the format of your workshop, and your team that you are going to conduct this workshop with.
Yeah, I would totally agree, and maybe also add that personally for me, first of all, I have a friend who hates any kind of icebreakers. And when I design any, I keep in mind that there are some people who really just hate this, and like they are okay and everything is fine with them and they have their right to hate it. So when I'm thinking about the icebreaker for the team, I try to keep in mind how well do I know them. So in this example Nick mentioned, this is a client we work with for a long time, so we know many people from that team, and kind of it's like a meeting old friends, and we can allow some kind of creativity in coming up with different icebreakers, because we can guess what will work. But if we work with the team we don't know, we probably would want to go with a safer option. And in this case, I always try to remember the goal. Why do I need an icebreaker? For example, it's like great facilitator rule to give everyone in the room kind of the possibility to hear their own voice before the conversation got serious, right? So people would be more comfortable with saying something work related afterwards, because they already tried and said something about their either their mood or like their associations with something or stuff like that. And also there are different kinds of organizations. So we have a client whose team is very happy if you ask them to share something personal, like show us your mug, for example, and like it's enough to make them happy, literally. Like they would prepare in advance for this. And in other cases, like where maybe communication is a little bit more formal, this might be really, really uncomfortable for people. So I always try to know in advance as much as possible and keep in mind like that we all are different, and like each team will have at least one person who hates this icebreaker no matter what we do.
Yana, Nick, thank you so much. I'm sure that this icebreaker ideas will actually bring value to the participants here. So please do try them out and reach back to us and tell you what you think. So we have time for probably 1 or 2 questions. Let's go with this one from Elena here. I saw that so many of you answered no, as I've never facilitated a journey mapping workshop, so that might be a good one for you. So what would be your main tip for first-time facilitators? Lots of problems come from mental state and nerves. How to prepare best?
I swear I did not prepare it for this question, but there is a story about the person who wanted to become an artist, but he had an issue. His hands were shaking. Like he decided to become an artist anyway. And there is a story about him which is called Embrace the Shake. And it's actually, I've read about it a long time ago, so I might be kind of screwing up with some detail, but I really remember this expression, embrace the shake. So I facilitated hundreds of workshops, and I'm still worried at the beginning, and I still might be shaking sometimes. And I guess the first advice is to accept that. That's okay. Like we are nervous to be around other people, especially now when we are in a live setting and we cannot really read each other's reactions. It's scary. So we are really brave people to do that, right? And after accepting that, it might actually be a little bit easier. So on the practical side, you can kind of get some comfort, for example, from the fact, I mean, in an online setting. In offline, it's a different story, that like you can only see half of me, and if my leg is shaking, you have no idea, right? So basically you can do something to calm yourself and no one will know. And there is another great advice is that actually, well, if you do something not like for an A grade, but just if your workshop will be okay, not great, just okay, it's a good result. It's better than nothing. It's a good result, and you should kind of really be okay with that. And I think it's a very good mindset for people doing something new in any field, not just workshops, because like to get really good at something, you need to accept some level of discomfort. So like the general, like I guess that's what I can share here. Nick?
I think I can suggest what I mentioned at the very beginning of this session. I mean, just apply the journey mindset here. I mean, use journey map, yeah, to design the workshop, the journey mapping workshop. Think about what will happen before, during, and after the workshop. Think about the goals. Yeah, so just build a map that will help you to design this workshop. I believe this will help you not, let's say, not to fail, yeah, during the workshop or after the workshop and before the workshop. So as Yana mentioned, you can use some predefined stages, some predefined swim lanes in a for this map, yeah, and start with this template and use it to design your workshop. I believe it will help